From streets to success, see how the two graduates changed their life from a crate of youths to a rich empire which amused everyone. They were laughed at by many people, but they consisted and worked hard. So don't forget to like, share, comment.
Chidi and Tunde sat on a faded concrete veranda on the outskirts of Lagos, watching the morning mist rise as the city woke up. Both exactly 25 years old, they had recently completed university with colorful degrees but possessed absolute emptiness in their pockets. They came from poor village families who had sacrificed every small coin from selling firewood just to send their brilliant sons to the city to learn. Chidi looked down at his worn shoes with fierce determination while Tunde adjusted his faded shirt and offered a reassuring smile because they had promised to conquer this giant city together. Their tiny rented room was nothing more than a dark concrete box with a single window looking out onto a narrow alleyway. Inside, they had only a scene mat on the cold floor, a plastic bucket, and a small kerosene stove that had been empty for days. They had spent the last 6 months walking through Abuja and Lagos under the scorching sun, their graduation certificates getting crumpled and stained with sweat inside brown envelopes. Every security guard at the grand corporate gates turned them away, saying there were no jobs for graduates without wealthy names or powerful connections. On this morning, their stomachs ached with hunger because they had not eaten a proper meal in 48 hours. Chidi turned to Tunde and said that their certificates would not feed them today, but their hands and minds certainly could if they swallowed their pride completely. Tunde nodded in agreement, refusing to let poverty defeat them. They looked at their very last piece of money, a single crumpled note hidden inside an old textbook, and realized it was just enough to buy a small wooden crate of fruit. They stood up, brushed the dust from their trousers, and walked toward the roaring heart of the wholesale market where the air was thick with the scent of ripe oranges and sweet bananas. Moving through the chaotic crowds with quiet dignity, they used their small money to carefully select the most beautiful, unblemished fruits available. They carried the heavy wooden crate on their shoulders for several kilometers until they reached a busy roadside junction where grand corporate offices met the bustling city traffic. As they set their crate down on the dusty pavement, the tropical sun rose high into the sky, casting a bright heat that made the tar on the road soften under the tires of passing vehicles. Many people looked at them with pity, while some former university classmates pointed and laughed at the sight of graduates selling fruit in the dirt. Chidi felt a sharp sting of shame, but Tunde placed a firm hand on his shoulder, whispering that the mud of Tunde would wash away when success arrived. Instead of hiding, the two young men stood tall and called out to the public with polite voices and radiant smiles. They wash each fruit with clean water until the skins glistened, speaking to every customer with the refined manners of educated gentlemen. By nightfall, every single fruit had been sold, leaving them with a small profit and an unbreakable sense of hope. The morning sun rose like a blazing gold coin over the city, signaling the start of a grueling routine that Chidi and Tunde would endure for many months. Having survived their first day, the two 25-year-old graduates expanded their reach, moving their fruit business between the roaring, crowded street corners of Lagos and the sprawling highway junctions of Abuja. They no longer carried a single wooden crate on their shoulders. Instead, they had constructed a small wooden pushcart with mismatched wheels that screeched loudly against the uneven asphalt. Every single morning began at 4 o'clock, when the air was still biting and cold, requiring them to push their heavy cart through the dark streets to the wholesale depots to secure the freshest harvest before the rest of the city even opened their eyes. The physical toll of their new life was immense, as the tropical climate of Nigeria showed no mercy to their young bodies. In Abuja, the dry heat of the afternoon sun beat down so intensely that the air felt like a furnace, making their skin glisten with thick streams of sweat that dripped onto the dusty pavement. In Lagos, sudden torrential downpours would instantly flood the roads, forcing Chidi and Tunde to stand knee-deep in murky water while desperately holding a plastic tap over their precious fruits to keep them from spoiling. Their palms became covered in thick, rough calluses from gripping the handles of the heavy wooden cart, and their legs felt like lead at the end of every 12-hour shift. Despite the exhaustion that threatened to crush their spirits, they never allowed themselves to slouch or look defeated, maintaining a posture of quiet strength that drew the attention of thousands of commuters. As their presence became a permanent fixture on the busy roadsides, the psychological battle grew even heavier than the physical labor. The busiest streets were filled with thousands of people from all walks of life, and not all of them were kind to the struggling fruit sellers. Many wealthy individuals rolling up their tinted car windows would look at Chidi and Tunde with utter disgust, shouting at them to move their cheap cart out of the way of their expensive vehicles. On several occasions, people who had known them during their proud university days would stop, point their fingers, and laugh loudly while making cruel jokes about how higher education had failed them completely. Chidi would sometimes feel a wave of intense sorrow cloud his bright eyes, remembering the late nights spent studying by candlelight, but Tunde would always step in with a powerful, booming laugh that silenced the mockers, reminding his brother that a man who works hard with his hands has absolutely nothing to be ashamed of. Instead of shrinking from the mockery, their persistence turned into their greatest weapon, making them famous among the local community. They refused to adopt the aggressive, shouting manners of typical street hawkers. Instead, they greeted every single person with a bright smile, flawless English, and a level of respect that made their customer service legendary. They began to decorate their small wooden cart with pristine cleanliness, wrapping the handles in clean white cloth and arranging the vibrant oranges, rich green avocados, and golden pineapples in beautiful geometric patterns that looked like a work of art. Busy office workers, market women, and corporate drivers began to actively seek out the two polite young men, bypassing dozens of other traders just to buy from their neat cart. Even the people who used to laugh at them stopped to marvel at their consistency, realizing that these were not ordinary street vendors, but visionaries who were simply using the dirt of the streets as a launching pad for a much greater destiny. The small savings that Chidi and Tunde had carefully gathered inside their old textbook began to grow, marking the true turning point of their long financial struggle. After months of enduring the harsh weather and the mockery of the streets, the two 25-year-old graduates realized that their small wooden pushcart could no longer contain the massive wave of daily customers who flooded their roadside spot. They had become famous across the local government areas of Lagos and Abuja for their impeccable manners and immaculate fruit, and their small earnings had slowly transformed into a respectable sum of money. While they were still struggling backward in many areas of their personal lives, still sleeping on the same thin floor mat and eating simple meals, their minds were completely focused on upgrading their business structure. They sat together under the dim light of their single room one evening, counting the neatly stacked notes of Nigerian currency, and made the bold decision to leave the dusty pavements behind forever. With their hearts pounding with excitement, they walked through the bustling commercial districts until they found a vacant, solid concrete building situated right along one of the busiest avenues in the city. The rent was incredibly high, demanding nearly every single note they had saved, but they knew that expanding their territory was the only way to solidify their financial freedom. After signing the paperwork, they stepped into the empty building and immediately went to work, scrubbing the floors until they shined and constructing beautiful, elevated wooden shelves along the walls. They completely upgraded the variety and quantity of their stock, moving far beyond simple oranges and bananas to introduce sweet watermelons, rich papayas, imported apples, and rare berries to the local market. Because the building was located in a premium, highly visible area where thousands of workers walked past daily, the new shop looked like a vibrant oasis of health and color in the middle of the concrete jungle. The opening day of their new building was an absolute triumph, as the thousands of customers they had treated so well on the streets immediately followed them inside. People who had grown accustomed to their radiant smiles and clean service were thrilled to see the two young men walking inside a sheltered, beautiful space where the fruits were kept cool and fresh. Chidi and Tunde worked from dawn until midnight, arranging the massive inventory, weighing items on their new digital scales, and welcoming every customer with the same deep respect they had practiced on the dirt roads. The business grew so rapidly that the shelves would often be completely emptied by midday, forcing them to establish direct supply lines with large agricultural farms in the rural areas to keep up with the overwhelming demand. As the weeks turned into months, The steady flow of income completely changed their financial reality, lifting them out of the brackets of poverty once and for all. They were no longer calculatedly dividing a single loaf of bread or worrying about the heavy rain leaking through a zinc roof. Even though they had finally achieved a comfortable and stable life, they never allowed the sudden influx of money to make them proud or forgetful of their humble beginnings. They continued to dress neatly, manage their accounts with mathematical precision, and treat every single customer with the ultimate humility, laying the perfect foundation for the massive wealth that was about to change their destinies forever.